The rifle barrel pressed against Rose Jennings's temple felt colder than the December wind that howled through the gaps in the stagecoach walls, and she thought how strange it was that after 19 years of having nothing, she would die with even less than that. The bandit's hand shook as he screamed for valuables, but Rose had only the threadbare dress on her back and the calluses on her palms from 10 years of scrubbing other people's floors in St. Louis. She had been traveling to Oklahoma City on money borrowed from the boarding house mistress who had finally taken pity on her, hoping to find work as a seamstress in a town that supposedly needed willing hands. Now, it seemed she would not even make it that far. "I said, give me everything you got." The bandit's voice cracked with desperation, and Rose could smell whiskey on his breath. She opened her mouth to explain she had nothing, but before the words could form, a shot rang out that made her ears ring. The bandit crumpled, and through the stagecoach window, Rose saw a man on a paint horse, his revolver still smoking in the bright winter sunlight of 1882. The rider dismounted with fluid grace, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the frozen ground. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar, and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He checked the fallen bandit, then approached the stagecoach where Rose and 3 other passengers sat frozen in shock. "Everyone all right in there?" His voice was deep and steady, nothing like the shaking desperation of the man he had just shot. Rose found she could not speak. Her whole body trembled, and she gripped the edge of the wooden seat so hard her knuckles went white. The other passengers, a merchant and an elderly couple, assured him they were unharmed. The cowboy's eyes landed on Rose last, and something in his expression softened. "Madam, you look like you have seen a ghost. Can you step down? Let me make sure you are steady on your feet." She managed to nod, and he opened the stagecoach door, extending his hand. Rose stared at it for a moment, at the calluses and scars that marked a working man's palm, then placed her own trembling hand in his. His grip was warm and firm, and he helped her down onto the road with surprising gentleness. "I am Samuel Vance," he said, not releasing her hand immediately. "I have been tracking that man for 3 days. He robbed a payroll wagon outside of Guthrie and killed the driver." "Rose Jennings," her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Thank you. I had nothing for him to take, and I think that made him angrier." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Men like that kill for sport as much as profit. You are lucky I caught up when I did." He finally released her hand, and Rose felt strangely bereft at the loss of that warmth. "Where are you headed?" "Oklahoma City. I have work waiting there, I hope. A seamstress position." "That is where I am headed as well. I have a ranch about 10 miles outside town." He glanced back at the stagecoach driver, who was checking his horses. "Driver, how long until you reach Oklahoma City?" "Should be there by nightfall if we do not run into more trouble," the driver called back. Samuel nodded, then looked at Rose again with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I will ride alongside until we reach town. Make sure there are no more surprises." The merchant poked his head out of the stagecoach. "That would be most appreciated, sir. And if you are ever in need of quality tobacco or fine leather goods, you come see me at Patterson's Mercantile. You have earned yourself a permanent discount." Samuel tipped his hat in acknowledgement, but his eyes stayed on Rose. "You better get back inside, Miss Jennings. It is too cold to be standing out here." Rose climbed back into the stagecoach, her legs still unsteady. As they resumed their journey, she watched through the window as Samuel mounted his horse and fell into position beside them. He sat tall in the saddle, his rifle across his lap, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Rose had never had anyone protect her before. Growing up in an orphanage in St. Louis, she had learned early that she could rely on no one but herself. When she turned 15, they had turned her out to make her own way, and she had worked every job she could find, scrubbing floors, washing laundry, serving in taverns where the men's hands wandered and the pay barely covered a corner to sleep in. She had never owned a single thing of value in her entire life. The dress she wore had been mended so many times the original fabric was hard to distinguish from the patches. She had no jewelry, no keepsakes, no photographs. Everything she had in the world fit in the small canvas bag at her feet, and even that contained only a spare set of undergarments, a second dress just as worn as the first, and a bar of soap she had saved for 2 months to afford. Yet as she watched Samuel Vance ride beside the stagecoach, she felt something she could not quite name. It was not gratitude alone, though she was grateful. It was something warmer, something that made her heart beat faster and her cheeks flush despite the cold. The landscape rolled past in shades of brown and gold, the winter grass brittle under a pale sky. They passed farmhouses and small settlements, cattle grazing in frozen fields. Rose had never been this far west before, had never seen land so open and vast. In St. Louis, buildings pressed close together, streets narrow and crowded. Here, the horizon seemed to stretch forever, and the sky felt big enough to swallow the whole world. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the silhouette of Oklahoma City appeared in the distance. It was smaller than Rose had imagined, a collection of wooden buildings clustered along a main street. But to her, it represented possibility. A chance to build something, even if that something was just a life where she did not go to bed hungry every night. The stagecoach pulled up in front of a hotel, and the passengers disembarked with stiff limbs and grateful sighs. Samuel dismounted and was immediately at the stagecoach door, offering his hand to help Rose down again. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes. Up close, she could see flecks of gold in the green and a small scar above his left eyebrow. "I do not know what would have happened if you had not been there." "No need to think about that now." Samuel held her bag while she steadied herself on the ground. The street was busy with evening activity, people heading home for supper, shop owners closing up for the night. "Where is this seamstress position you mentioned?" Rose pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. "Mrs. Harriet Morrison. She runs a dress shop on Main Street, or so her letter said. She needed someone to help with alterations and making clothes for the officers' wives at Fort Reno." Samuel's expression brightened. "I know Mrs. Morrison. Good woman, fair employer. Her shop is just down the street." He gestured with his free hand. "I will walk you there." "You have already done so much," Rose protested. But Samuel was already moving, and she had to hurry to keep up with his long strides. "It is no trouble. Besides, I need to pick up some supplies before I head back to the ranch, and everything is on Main Street anyway." They walked in silence for a moment, their boots crunching on the frozen dirt. Rose was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the way he positioned himself between her and the street, the way other men nodded respectfully as they passed. Samuel Vance was clearly known in this town and respected. "Have you lived here long?" Rose asked, wanting to hear his voice again. 5 years. I came out from Texas after the land run of '77, bought some property, and built it up into a working cattle ranch. It is not much, but it is mine." There was pride in his voice, and something else. Loneliness, perhaps. That must have taken a great deal of hard work. It did, still does. Samuel glanced at her, and Rose saw something vulnerable in his expression. "It is a lot of land for one man to manage. I have a couple of ranch hands who help, but it gets lonely out there sometimes. Nothing but cattle and sky for miles." They reached a shop with a neat sign that read, "Morrison's Fine Dresses." Through the window, Rose could see bolts of fabric in various colors, a dress form wearing a half-finished gown of deep blue silk. Her heart quickened with anticipation and nervousness. Samuel opened the door, a small bell chiming overhead. A woman in her 50s looked up from where she was pinning a hem. She had kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Samuel Vance, as I live and breathe," she said, setting down her pins. "What brings you to town?" "Brought you your new seamstress, Mrs. Morrison. Found her on the stagecoach from St. Louis." Samuel gently guided Rose forward. "This is Miss Rose Jennings." Mrs. Morrison's face lit up. "Miss Jennings, I was beginning to worry you would not come. The letter I sent was nearly 3 months ago." "I had to save money for the journey," Rose explained, her cheeks heating. "It took longer than I hoped." "Well, you are here now, and that is what matters." "Mrs. Morrison walked around her, evaluating her with a professional eye. "You are thin as a rail, girl. When did you last have a proper meal?" Rose could not remember. "I ate on the stagecoach," she lied. Mrs. Morrison made a disapproving sound. "Samuel, you make sure this girl gets supper at the hotel before they stop serving. I cannot have my seamstress fainting at the sewing machine." She turned back to Rose. "You can stay in the room above the shop. It is small but clean, and I will take a modest amount from your wages for rent. Does that suit you?" "Yes, madam. Thank you." Rose felt tears prick her eyes. A job, a room, a future. More than she had dared hope for. "Good. You start tomorrow morning at 7. We have orders backed up for weeks. Mrs. Morrison smiled warmly. Welcome to Oklahoma City, Miss Jennings. Outside, Samuel still held Rose's bag. Let me take you to get that supper Mrs. Morrison mentioned. The hotel has a decent dining room. Rose wanted to refuse, aware that she had only a few precious coins left and no idea when she would receive her first wages, but her stomach betrayed her with a low growl. Samuel pretended not to notice. My treat, he said firmly before she could protest. You had a terrible scare today, and I would like to make sure you were settled before I head back. They walked to the hotel, and Samuel secured her a table near the fireplace in the dining room. The warmth felt like heaven after the cold stagecoach, and Rose could not help but close her eyes for a moment, savoring it. When she opened them, Samuel was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. You have had a hard time of it, have you not? There seemed no point in lying. Yes, but things will be better now. I have work, and Mrs. Morrison seems kind. She is. She helped my sister when she first came to town, before she married and moved to Kansas. Samuel signaled the waiter, who brought them plates of roast beef, potatoes, and carrots. The smell made Rose's mouth water, and she had to exercise great restraint not to fall upon the food like a starving animal. They ate in companionable silence for a while. The food was the best Rose had tasted in months, maybe years. She had forgotten what it felt like to be full, to not have hunger gnawing at her insides. Tell me about your ranch, she said finally, wanting to know more about this man who had saved her life and shown her more kindness in one afternoon than she had experienced in years. Samuel's face transformed when he talked about his land. He described the rolling hills, the creek that ran through the property, the herd of cattle he was building. He told her about the house he had built with his own hands, modest but sturdy, with a porch that faced west so he could watch the sunset. It sounds beautiful, Rose said softly. It is. Or it could be, with the right touch. I am not much good at making a house feel like a home. I can build a fence and break a horse, but things like curtains and such are beyond me. He smiled, and Rose's heart did a strange flip in her chest. I could make curtains, she said, then immediately felt foolish. I mean, if you ever needed, I am quite good with a needle. I might take you up on that. Samuel's eyes held hers for a long moment, and Rose felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fireplace. They finished their meal, and Samuel walked her back to Mrs. Morrison's shop. The street had quieted, most people home for the evening, and the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. At the door, Samuel finally handed Rose her bag. Thank you for everything, Mr. Vance, Rose said. I do not know how I can ever repay you. Samuel, he corrected gently. And there is nothing to repay. I am just glad I was there when you needed help. He hesitated, then added, Miss Jennings, would it be all right if I called on you sometime? Maybe took you to supper again when you were settled? Rose's heart soared. I would like that very much, and please, call me Rose. Samuel's smile could have lit the whole street. Rose, that is a beautiful name. He tipped his hat. I will be back in town next week. Until then, you take care of yourself. Rose watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the darkness, and touched her hand to her chest, where her heart was racing. She climbed the narrow stairs at the back of Mrs. Morrison's shop and found the room exactly as promised, small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. It was the first space that was entirely hers, and Rose stood in the middle of it, turning slowly, taking it all in. She had never owned a single thing before, had never had a place to call her own. As she lay down on the bed, still wearing her dress because she had no nightgown, she thought about Samuel Vance and the way he had looked at her. No one had ever looked at her like that before. Like she mattered, like she was someone worth protecting and caring about. The next morning, Rose was at the shop at 6:30, not wanting to be late on her first day. Mrs. Morrison arrived at 6:45 and looked pleased to find her waiting. Eager, I like that. She unlocked the shop and led Rose inside, showing her the sewing machines, the fabric storage, the pattern books. Most of what we do is practical, dresses for townswomen, shirts for ranchers, alterations. But we also get orders for fancier things, especially from the fort. Officers' wives like to have something special for the dances they hold. Rose ran her hand over a bolt of emerald silk. I have never worked with anything this fine before. Well, you will learn. I can see you have good hands for sewing. Mrs. Morrison pulled out a basket full of mending. "Start with these. I need to see your stitching. Make sure you are as skilled as your letter claimed." Rose set to work, her needle flying through fabric. She had been sewing since she was 6 years old, one of the few useful skills the orphanage had taught her. By midday, she had completed the entire basket of mending, each stitch tiny and precise, each repair nearly invisible. Mrs. Morrison examined her work with growing approval. "You were not exaggerating in your letter. This is excellent work, Rose. I think we will get along just fine." The days fell into a rhythm. Rose woke early, worked until evening, then climbed back to her small room, where she would practice new stitches or read by candlelight when she could afford a candle. Mrs. Morrison paid her fairly, and even gave her extra when Rose completed orders particularly quickly or well. For the first time in her life, Rose had money of her own, and she began to save it carefully, dreaming of the things she might someday afford. A new dress made of fabric she chose herself, a warm cloak for winter, maybe even a nice pair of boots. But mostly she thought about Samuel Vance. True to his word, he came to town the following week. Rose was in the shop, working on a dress for one of the fort wives, when the bell chimed and she looked up to see him filling the doorway. Her heart leaped. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Morrison," Samuel said, tipping his hat. "Rose." "Samuel." Mrs. Morrison smiled knowingly. "Come to pick up those shirts I mended for you?" "Yes, madam, and I was hoping to steal Rose away for supper, if you can spare her." Mrs. Morrison waved her hand. "Go on, girl. You have been working hard all week. You deserve an evening out." She gave Rose a meaningful look. "Samuel Vance is a good man, one of the best." Rose quickly put away her sewing and grabbed her shawl. Outside, Samuel offered his arm, and she took it, marveling at how natural it felt. "I have been thinking about you all week," Samuel said as they walked toward the hotel, "wondering how you were settling in." "It has been wonderful. Mrs. Morrison is an excellent teacher, and I love the work." Rose looked up at him. "And I have been thinking about you too, about your ranch, and what it must be like. Would you like to see it? I could take you out this Sunday if you have the day off. We could make a day of it. I could pack a picnic." "I would love that," Rose said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. They had supper together, talking easily like old friends. Samuel told her about the new foals that had been born on his ranch, about the cattle drive he was planning for spring. Rose told him about the dresses she was making, about the colors and fabrics that made her heart sing. It felt wonderful to have someone truly listen to her, to care about what she thought and felt. When he walked her back to the shop, Samuel took her hand. "I am really glad you came to Oklahoma City, Rose Jennings." "So am I," Rose whispered. He squeezed her hand gently, then let go, tipping his hat before walking away. Rose watched him go, her hand still warm from his touch. Sunday arrived with bright sunshine, despite the winter cold. Samuel came for Rose in a wagon, having left his horse at the livery in favor of something more comfortable for the long ride. Rose wore her best dress, which was still shabby by most standards, but Mrs. Morrison had given her some ribbon scraps to trim it with, and she felt almost pretty. The ride out to Samuel's ranch took over an hour, but Rose did not mind. The landscape was beautiful in its starkness, all gold grass and blue sky. Samuel pointed out landmarks, a distinctive rock formation, a grove of cottonwoods that marked the creek, a neighboring ranch in the distance. When they crested a hill and Rose saw Samuel's property spread out before them, she caught her breath. The house was exactly as he had described it, modest but well built, with a wide porch facing west. There was a barn, several corrals, and cattle dotting the hillsides. It was beautiful in its simplicity, a place carved out of wilderness through hard work and determination. "Welcome to the Vance Ranch," Samuel said, and Rose could hear the pride in his voice. He helped her down from the wagon and showed her around. The barn was neat and organized, the animals healthy and well cared for. The ranch hands, two weathered cowboys named Pete and Jake, tipped their hats respectfully when Samuel introduced her. "The boss has been talking about nothing but you all week, miss," Pete said with a grin. Nice to finally put a face to the name. Samuel glared at him, but Rose just laughed. It felt good to be talked about, to matter to someone. Inside the house, Rose could see what Samuel had meant about needing a woman's touch. The furniture was sturdy but sparse, the walls bare, the windows uncovered. It was clean but stark, more a shelter than a home. "I can see it in your face," Samuel said. You are already planning curtains and such." "It has good bones," Rose said diplomatically. "It just needs some softness, some color." "I would like that." Samuel moved closer to her, his expression serious. "Rose, I know we have not known each other long, but I need to tell you something. From the moment I saw you in that stagecoach, something in me just knew. I cannot explain it any better than that. You are special, and I want to know you better. I want to spend time with you, court you properly, see where this goes." Rose's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. "I feel it too," she admitted. "I have never felt anything like this before. You make me feel safe and valued, and like maybe I could have the kind of life I never dared to dream about." Samuel reached out and gently cupped her face in his hand. "You deserve every good thing, Rose Jennings. And I want to be the man who gives them to you, if you will let me." "Yes," Rose whispered. "Yes, I want that too." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Rose did not want to. When his lips met hers, soft and warm, she felt like she was finally coming home after a lifetime of wandering. They spent the rest of the day together, walking the property, sharing the picnic Samuel had packed. He told her about his childhood in Texas, about losing his parents to fever and coming west to make a new start. Rose told him about the orphanage, about the years of scraping by, about the fear that had been her constant companion until the moment he had appeared outside that stagecoach. "You never have to be afraid again," Samuel said fiercely. "Not while I am here." As the sun began to set, painting the western sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, they sat on the porch together. Samuel had his arm around Rose, and she leaned into his warmth, feeling more content than she ever had in her life. "I should get you back to town," Samuel said reluctantly. "Do not want Mrs. Morrison thinking I have absconded with her seamstress." Rose laughed. "She would probably hunt you down and make you mend your own shirts for the rest of your life." The ride back to Oklahoma City seemed shorter, both of them reluctant for the day to end. At the shop, Samuel helped Rose down from the wagon and held her hands in his. "Can I see you again next week?" he asked. "I would be disappointed if you did not," Rose replied. He kissed her again, longer this time, and Rose felt heat spread through her entire body. When they finally pulled apart, Samuel looked dazed. "You are going to be the death of me, Rose Jennings," he said, but he was smiling. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Rose's life. Samuel came to town twice a week, sometimes more. They had supper together, took walks, attended a church social, where Samuel proudly introduced her to everyone as his girl. Rose met more of the townspeople, the doctor, the school teacher, the banker who approved loans for ranchers. Everyone spoke highly of Samuel, confirming what Rose already knew. He was a good man, honest and hard-working, respected by all who knew him. Mrs. Morrison watched their courtship with satisfaction. "I had a feeling about you two," she said one day while they were working. "Samuel has been alone too long. He needs someone to share that ranch with, and you need someone who will appreciate you for the treasure you are." "He wants me to make curtains for his house," Rose said, blushing. "And maybe some tablecloths, some cushions for the furniture." "Does he now?" Mrs. Morrison's eyes twinkled. "Sounds like he is planning for the future, a future that includes you." Rose ducked her head, unable to hide her smile. "I hope so. I know it is soon, but I cannot imagine my life without him in it anymore." "When you know, Mrs. Morrison said wisely. "My Harold proposed after 3 weeks of knowing me, and we were married for 35 years before the Lord took him home. Time does not matter when it is right." As winter deepened into the new year of 1883, Samuel and Rose grew closer. He taught her to ride, lifting her onto his gentlest horse and walking beside her until she found her confidence. She made him curtains in deep blue fabric, and the first time he saw them hanging in his windows, he looked at her with such tenderness that Rose felt tears spring to her eyes. "It looks like a home now," he said, "because of you." They sat before his fireplace, Rose curled against his side, and talked about everything and nothing. Samuel told her his dreams for the ranch, expanding the herd, maybe breeding horses as well as cattle. Rose told him about the dress shop she dreamed of opening someday, where women could come and be treated with respect regardless of their station in life. "You could do that here," Samuel said. "Mrs. Morrison will not work forever. When she retires, you could take over the shop, or open your own." "I do not have that kind of money," Rose said practically. "Not yet, but you are young and you are talented. You will get there." Samuel tilted her face up to look at him. "And you would not have to do it alone. I would help you. We could be partners in everything." Rose's breath caught. "Samuel, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I love you, Rose Jennings. I have loved you since that first day, and I will love you for the rest of my life. I want to marry you, build a life with you, fill that house with children and laughter, and all the things that make a house a home." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. "I want you to be my wife." Rose looked down and saw a gold ring resting in his palm. It was simple but beautiful, a smooth band that gleamed in the firelight. She had never seen anything more precious in her entire life. "I know you have not had an easy life," Samuel continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I know you have had to fight for every scrap, every moment of safety. But I want to give you something different. I want to give you a home, a family, a life where you never have to worry about where your next meal is coming from, or whether you have a roof over your head. I want to give you everything you deserve and more." Tears streamed down Rose's face. "I have never owned a single thing before," she whispered. "Nothing that was truly mine. I do not even know what that feels like." Samuel took her hand and placed the ring in her palm, closing her fingers around it gently. "This is yours. My heart is yours. Everything I have, everything I am, it is all yours if you will have me. Will you marry me, Rose?" Rose opened her hand and looked at the ring through her tears. The gold caught the light, warm and solid and real. She thought about the girl she had been just a few months ago, hungry and afraid, with nothing to her name but a patched dress and a canvas bag. She thought about the woman she was becoming, skilled and valued, loved beyond measure. She thought about the future that was suddenly spread before her like a gift, full of possibility and hope. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I will marry you, Samuel Vance. I love you so much it frightens me sometimes. You have given me everything I never dared to hope for, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you have made me." Samuel slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, and Rose tasted salt from her own tears mixing with the sweetness of his lips. When they finally pulled apart, Samuel was crying too, and Rose reached up to wipe his tears away. "I never thought I would find this," Samuel admitted. "I thought I would just work my ranch alone until I was old and gray. But then you came into my life like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I was praying, and everything changed." They held each other close as the fire burned low, making plans and dreaming dreams. They decided to marry in the spring, giving Rose time to make her own wedding dress, and to let Mrs. Morrison find a replacement seamstress. Samuel wanted to add a room onto the house before Rose moved in, a proper sewing room with big windows for light so she could continue her work if she wanted. "I do not want you to give up something you love," he said. "The ranch will keep me busy, but you should have your sewing if it makes you happy." "You make me happy," Rose said. "Everything else is just extra." When Samuel finally took her back to town, it was late, but Rose did not care. She looked at the ring on her finger the entire ride, still unable to believe it was real. At the shop, she practically floated up to her room, and when Mrs. Morrison saw her the next morning, she took one look at Rose's face and the ring on her finger and let out a delighted laugh. "He finally did it! I was wondering how long he would wait. That man has been carrying that ring around in his pocket for 2 weeks, working up the courage." "You knew?" Rose asked, astonished. "Honey, everyone in town knew. Samuel came into Patterson's Mercantile and looked at every ring they had, asking opinions from anyone who would listen. Half the women in Oklahoma City helped him pick that one out." Mrs. Morrison hugged her. "I am so happy for you, Rose. You have found yourself a good man." The news spread quickly through the small town. Women Rose had only met in passing congratulated her. The minister's wife offered to host a wedding luncheon after the ceremony. Even the ranch hands Pete and Jake rode into town specifically to congratulate her and tell her they were looking forward to having a Mrs. at the ranch. "Maybe you can teach the boss to cook something other than beans and hardtack," Jake said with a grin. Rose threw herself into preparing for the wedding, with the same dedication she brought to her sewing. She chose fabric for her dress carefully, a soft cream color, not quite white but beautiful in its simplicity. She would trim it with lace she made herself, delicate as spiderweb. Mrs. Morrison helped her with the design, and together they created something that made Rose feel like a princess. Samuel was equally busy at the ranch, building the sewing room addition and fixing up the house. Every time he came to town, he had updates for Rose. He had painted the bedroom, replaced some worn floorboards, built new furniture for the sewing room. His excitement was infectious, and Rose loved seeing him so happy. On a cold February evening, Samuel took Rose to meet his closest neighbors, the Peterson family, who owned the ranch to the east. They welcomed Rose warmly, and Mrs. Peterson, a kind woman with 5 children, offered to teach Rose about running a ranch household. "It is different from town living," she explained. "You have to think ahead more, plan for seasons, put food by. But it is a good life, honest and satisfying." Rose soaked up every piece of advice, determined to be a good wife and partner to Samuel. She learned about making soap and butter, about preserving vegetables and meat, about the 100 small tasks that kept a ranch running smoothly. Samuel watched her with such obvious pride that Rose felt her heart might burst. Winter gradually loosened its grip, and the first signs of spring appeared, tiny green shoots pushing through the frozen ground, birds returning from the south, the air losing some of its bitter bite. Samuel and Rose set their wedding date for the first Saturday in April, when the wildflowers would be blooming and the weather would be mild. The week before the wedding, Rose finished her dress. When she tried it on for Mrs. Morrison, the older woman's eyes filled with tears. "You look like an angel," she said. "Samuel is going to forget how to breathe when he sees you." Rose looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. The dress fit her perfectly, emphasizing the curves she had developed now that she was eating regularly. Her face had filled out, losing the gaunt hollows that had marked her when she first arrived in Oklahoma City. Her hair, which she had always kept in a severe bun, was loose around her shoulders, shining from the good soap she could now afford. But more than the physical changes, there was something different in her eyes. Joy, confidence, hope. "I never thought I would have this," Rose said softly. "A wedding, a husband who loves me, a future that does not involve scraping by day after day. It feels like a dream." "It is not a dream, honey. It is your life, and you deserve every bit of it." Mrs. Morrison squeezed her shoulders. "Now, let's get this dress wrapped up carefully. We do not want anything to happen to it before Saturday." The night before the wedding, Rose could barely sleep. She lay in her small room above the shop for the last time, thinking about how much had changed in just a few short months. This time tomorrow, she would be Rose Vance, wife to Samuel, mistress of a ranch, partner in a life she had built with a man who loved her beyond measure. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, perfect spring weather. Mrs. Morrison and several of the townswomen came to help Rose get ready, doing her hair and helping her into her dress. When Rose finally looked in the mirror, fully prepared, she barely suppressed a gasp. She looked beautiful, truly beautiful, perhaps for the first time in her life. The ceremony was held in the small church at the center of town. Rose walked down the aisle alone, having no family to give her away, but she did not feel alone. The church was full of people who had become her friends and neighbors, all smiling and happy for her. And at the altar, Samuel waited in his best suit, his eyes locked on her with an expression of such love and wonder that Rose felt tears threaten to spill over. When she reached him, Samuel took her hands and whispered, "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." The minister, an elderly man named Reverend Williams, conducted the ceremony with warmth and humor. When it came time for the vows, Samuel spoke his clearly and firmly, promising to love, honor, and cherish Rose all the days of his life. Rose's voice shook with emotion as she made the same promises, but she meant every word with her whole heart. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Williams said, beaming. "Samuel, you may kiss your bride." Samuel cupped Rose's face in his hands and kissed her gently, mindful of their audience. But Rose could feel the passion and promise beneath the restraint. When they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The wedding luncheon was held at the hotel, the same place where Samuel had first bought Rose supper. The community had come together to provide food and drink, and the celebration lasted well into the afternoon. Rose found herself passed from person to person, receiving congratulations and advice and warm wishes. Samuel never strayed far from her side, always keeping one hand on her waist or her shoulder, as if he could not quite believe she was real and needed the physical contact to reassure himself. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Samuel leaned down and whispered in Rose's ear, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Vance." Mrs. Vance. Rose's heart sang. Yes, I am ready. They took their leave amid more cheers and well wishes. Someone had decorated Samuel's wagon with ribbons and tin cans, and the noise they made clattering along the road made both Samuel and Rose laugh. The ride out to the ranch felt different now, weighted with significance. Rose was not just a visitor anymore. She was going home. When they arrived, Samuel insisted on carrying Rose over the threshold despite her laughing protests. "It is tradition," he said firmly, "and I want to do this right." Inside, the house glowed in the light of dozens of candles. Samuel had clearly been out here earlier to prepare, and Rose felt her heart swell with love for this thoughtful, wonderful man who was now her husband. "Welcome home, Rose," Samuel said softly, setting her down gently. Rose looked around at the house that was now hers, the blue curtains she had made, the furniture Samuel had built, the new sewing room visible through an open door. "It is perfect," she whispered. "Everything is perfect." Samuel took her hand and led her to the bedroom, where more candles burned softly. He turned to face her, suddenly nervous. "I want you to know that I will never hurt you, Rose. I will always treat you with respect and gentleness. If you are scared or need time, just tell me." Rose reached up and touched his face. "I am not scared. I love you, Samuel. I trust you." What followed was tender and sweet. Samuel gentle with her inexperience, Rose giving herself completely to the man she loved. When they finally lay tangled together in the darkness, both breathing hard, Rose felt a completeness she had not known was possible. "I love you," Samuel murmured against her hair. "My beautiful wife." "I love you too," Rose whispered back. "My husband." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the ring on Rose's finger gleaming in the moonlight that streamed through the window. The next days and weeks were a period of adjustment and discovery. Rose learned the rhythms of ranch life: early mornings, hard work, simple pleasures. She learned to cook on the big cast-iron stove, to churn butter, to tend the vegetable garden Samuel helped her plant. Samuel taught her more about horses and cattle, and she found she had a gentle touch with the animals. The ranch hands, Pete and Jake, treated her with unfailing respect and good humor, clearly delighted to have a woman's presence on the ranch. Rose also continued her sewing, working in her beautiful new room with its big windows and good light. Mrs. Morrison sent work out to her regularly, and Rose found she could balance her ranch duties with her sewing. She made clothes for Samuel and the hands, curtains, and cushions for the house, a quilt for their bed that she worked on bit by bit, piecing together scraps into a pattern of stars. But mostly, she reveled in being loved. Samuel showed her in countless ways every day that she mattered to him, bringing her wildflowers from the fields, rubbing her tired shoulders after a long day, making her laugh with stories about the cattle's antics. He consulted her on ranch decisions, valuing her opinion. He held her every night as they fell asleep and kissed her every morning when they woke. In June, Rose realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she thought it was just the change in her life, the difference between town living and ranch living. But when she missed a second month and began feeling ill in the mornings, she knew. She was carrying Samuel's child. She told him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, his favorite time of day. "Samuel, I have something to tell you." He looked at her, immediately attentive. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine, better than fine." Rose took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Samuel just stared at her, not comprehending. Then his face broke into the widest smile Rose had ever seen. "A baby? We are having a baby?" "Yes," Rose said, laughing at his joy. "Sometime in February, I think." Samuel let out a whoop that startled the horses in the nearby corral, then picked Rose up and spun her around. "We are having a baby! I am going to be a father." He set her down carefully, suddenly worried. "Are you feeling all right? Should you be working so hard? Do you need to see the doctor?" "I am fine," Rose assured him, touched by his concern. "Women have been having babies since the dawn of time. I am healthy and strong, and everything will be fine." But Samuel fussed over her anyway, insisting she rest more, not lift anything heavy, eat plenty of good food. Rose found it endearing, even when it became a bit overbearing. Pete and Jake were equally excited, already making plans to teach the baby to ride and rope. "Assuming it is a boy," Jake said. Even if it is a girl, Pete countered. Girls need to know how to handle a horse out here. As summer faded into fall, Rose's belly grew. She felt wonderful despite the morning sickness that plagued her first few months. There was something deeply satisfying about carrying Samuel's child, about creating a new life from their love. She sewed tiny clothes with careful stitches, made blankets and caps, and all the things a baby would need. Samuel built a cradle from smooth wood, sanding it until there was not a single rough edge, then painting it with careful precision. Winter came again, and with it the knowledge that Rose's time was drawing near. Mrs. Peterson came to stay at the ranch for the last few weeks, saying she would not leave Rose to go through this without another woman present. Samuel was grateful, though he hated leaving Rose's side, even to do necessary ranch work. On a cold February morning in 1884, exactly 1 year after Samuel had proposed, Rose went into labor. Mrs. Peterson sent Samuel out of the house, telling him to make himself useful elsewhere, but he could not go far. He paced outside in the cold, Pete and Jake keeping him company, all 3 men jumping at every sound from the house. It was a long labor, lasting well into the night. Samuel wore a path in the frozen ground with his pacing, praying more fervently than he ever had in his life. Finally, just before midnight, he heard the sound he had been waiting for, the thin, angry wail of a newborn baby. Mrs. Peterson opened the door, her face exhausted but smiling. "You have a son, Samuel, and Rose is fine, tired, but fine." Samuel did not wait for permission. He rushed into the house and to the bedroom, where Rose lay propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. "Rose," Samuel breathed, kneeling beside the bed. "Oh, Rose, are you all right?" "I am wonderful." Rose's voice was tired but full of joy. "Look at him, Samuel. Look at our son." Samuel gazed down at the baby and felt his heart expand to a size he had not known was possible. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face. He was perfect. "He is beautiful," Samuel whispered. "You are both beautiful. Thank you, Rose. Thank you for this gift." Rose smiled. "We need to name him. I was thinking maybe Samuel after his father." "How about we save that for the next one?" Samuel said, stroking the baby's soft head with one finger. "I was thinking about my father. His name was Simon. What do you think of Simon Vance?" "Simon," Rose repeated, testing it out. "I like it. Simon Vance. Welcome to the world, little one." Baby Simon proved to be healthy and strong, with good lungs that he used frequently in the night. Rose and Samuel stumbled through those first exhausting weeks, learning how to be parents, marveling at every tiny change in their son. Samuel was a devoted father, taking Simon from Rose whenever he could to let her rest, walking the floor with him at night, singing off key lullabies that somehow soothed the baby's cries. As winter gave way to spring, the ranch came alive with new growth, and Simon grew along with it. He became more alert, beginning to smile and make cooing sounds that delighted his parents. Rose found a new rhythm that included caring for Simon, managing the household, and still doing some sewing when time allowed. It was exhausting and chaotic, and absolutely wonderful. On their first wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Rose with a gift, a beautiful mother of pearl comb for her hair. "I know you already have your ring," he said, "but I wanted to give you something else that is just yours." Rose cradled the comb, tears in her eyes. Between the ring and the comb, she now owned 2 beautiful things. But more than that, she owned a home, a life, a family. She had a husband who loved her and a son who depended on her. She had friends and neighbors, useful skills, and a future full of promise. "Thank you," she whispered, kissing Samuel deeply. "For everything, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me this life." "Thank you for saying yes," Samuel replied, "for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy and his dreams." They stood together on the porch, Simon sleeping peacefully in Rose's arms, watching the sun set over the ranch. The land stretched out before them in shades of gold and green, full of possibility. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. Closer by, horses whinnied softly in their corral. The house behind them glowed with warm light from the windows, welcoming and homey, with Rose's touches throughout. "Do you remember that day on the stagecoach?" Rose asked. "When you saved my life?" "Of course! How could I forget?" "I was so scared. I thought I was going to die having never really lived, never having anything that was truly mine. Rose looked down at the ring on her finger, then at the baby in her arms, then up at Samuel. I never imagined this. I never dared to hope for anything like this. You deserve it all, Samuel said fiercely. Every bit of happiness, every moment of peace and joy. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you have it. You already have, Rose said softly. The moment you put this ring in my palm and smiled, everything changed. You gave me a future, Samuel. You gave me a home. You gave me love. Those are the most precious things I have ever owned. Samuel wrapped his arm around her, careful not to jostle Simon, and they stood together in the gathering dusk. From inside the house, Rose could hear Mrs. Peterson, who had stayed on to help with the baby, humming as she cleaned up from supper. Pete and Jake were in the barn, settling the horses for the night. The whole ranch felt alive with purpose and contentment. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Simon stirred and opened his eyes, looking up at his parents with that unfocused baby gaze. Rose smiled down at him, then looked at Samuel, finding him already watching her with that same expression of love and wonder he had worn since the day they met. I love you, she said, not for the first time, and certainly not for the last. I love you too, Samuel replied. My Rose, my wife, the best thing that ever happened to me. They went inside as the night grew cold, closing the door on the darkness and stepping into the warmth and light of their home. Rose put Simon to bed in his cradle, singing softly to him as his eyes drifted closed. Samuel banked the fire and locked the doors, doing all the small tasks that marked the end of a day. In their bedroom, they prepared for sleep, moving around each other with the easy familiarity of a married couple. When they finally climbed into bed, Samuel pulled Rose close, her back to his chest, his arm draped protectively over her. Tomorrow I need to ride out and check the north fence, Samuel murmured drowsily. Pete said he saw some damage from that storm last week. I will pack you a lunch, Rose replied, equally sleepy. And I need to finish that dress for Mrs. Morrison's customer. The fort dance is next week. We should go to that dance. Mrs. Peterson can watch Simon for the evening. It would be nice to go out together, just the two of us. I would like that. Rose laced her fingers through Samuel's. We have not danced since our wedding. Then it is settled. I will dust off my good suit, and you will wear that blue dress that makes your eyes look like sapphires. Rose smiled in the darkness. This was her life now, planning dances and packing lunches and worrying about fence repairs. It was ordinary and simple and absolutely perfect. She had never imagined that ordinary could feel like such a blessing. The years rolled forward with their own gentle rhythm. Simon grew from a baby into a toddler, taking his first steps one sunny morning in the barn, much to the delight of Pete and Jake, who swore they had taught him. He had his father's green eyes and his mother's smile, and he was the joy of everyone on the ranch. When Simon was 2, Rose discovered she was expecting again. This time, the pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She gave birth to a daughter in the spring of 1886, a tiny, delicate girl with red gold hair and blue eyes. They named her Sarah, after Samuel's mother, and she proved to be as different from Simon as night from day. Quiet, where he was boisterous, cautious, where he was bold. We have one of each now, Samuel said, holding Sarah while Simon helped by patting his sister's head with sticky hands. A boy and a girl. Our family is complete. But life had other plans. 2 years later, another son arrived, whom they named James, and then 2 years after that, another daughter, Elizabeth. The house that had once seemed spacious now felt full of life and noise and love. Rose and Samuel added more rooms, expanding the house to accommodate their growing family. The ranch prospered as well. Samuel's hard work paid off with a thriving cattle operation and a growing reputation for quality horses. Rose continued her sewing, teaching Sarah and Elizabeth as they grew older, passing on her skills. Simon showed a natural talent for ranching, always at his father's side, learning everything Samuel could teach him. James was more interested in books and numbers, and Samuel encouraged that too, saying the ranch would need someone who could keep good records and manage the business side of things. Mrs. Morrison eventually retired, and Rose took over the dress shop in town, hiring other women to help while she managed things from the ranch. It became a successful business, providing income for several families. Rose never forgot what it was like to be desperate for work, and she always paid fair wages and treated her employees with respect. Pete and Jake remained with the ranch all those years, becoming like uncles to the children. They taught Simon and James to ride and rope, to read the weather and the land. They teased Sarah and Elizabeth gently, always respectful, always kind. They were family in all the ways that mattered. As the children grew, Rose sometimes reflected on the long journey that had brought her here. She thought about that desperate girl on the stagecoach, scared and hungry, with nothing to her name. She thought about the moment Samuel had appeared like something out of a dream, solid and real and good. She thought about the gold ring he had placed in her palm, the first thing she had ever truly owned, and how it had represented so much more than metal and promise. That ring never left her finger. Even as the years etched lines around her eyes and threaded silver through her dark hair, the ring remained, a constant reminder of the day her life had truly begun. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1903, Samuel took Rose back to the spot where he had proposed, the living room of their house where the fireplace still crackled warmly on cold nights. Their children were grown, or nearly so. Simon was 20, already running much of the ranch operation. Sarah was 17, engaged to the son of a neighboring rancher. James was 15, planning to study accounting in Oklahoma City. And Elizabeth was 13, still young enough to be their baby, but independent enough to spend the evening with friends in town so her parents could have time alone. 20 years, Samuel said, holding Rose close as they swayed to music only they could hear. Feels like yesterday, and forever, all at once. I know what you mean, Rose replied, resting her head on his shoulder. I look at you and still see that cowboy who saved my life. But I also see every year we have lived together, every challenge we have faced, every joy we have shared. I would not change a single moment, Samuel said. Well, maybe that time Simon broke his arm falling out of the hayloft. I could have done without that scare, Rose laughed. Or when Sarah had scarlet fever and we thought we might lose her. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. But she recovered, and Simon's arm healed, and we made it through everything together. Samuel pulled back to look at Rose's face. You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. More beautiful than the day I married you, because now I can see our whole life together when I look at you. You are a romantic, Rose said, but she was smiling. Only with you. Samuel kissed her softly. Always with you. They stayed up late that night, talking about their life together, their children, their dreams for the future. Samuel wanted to expand the horse breeding operation. Rose wanted to open a second dress shop, maybe train young women in the skill of seamstressing so they could support themselves. They planned a trip to Kansas to visit Samuel's sister, whom Rose had never met. They dreamed about grandchildren, about growing old together on this land they had built into a home. As the fire burned low and midnight approached, Rose looked at her husband of 20 years and felt the same rush of love and gratitude she had felt that first night he had saved her life. Some things never changed, not in any way that mattered. The years continued their gentle march forward. Simon married and had children of his own, building a house on the far edge of the ranch property. Sarah married her rancher and moved to his family's land, visiting often with her own growing brood. James finished his studies and returned home to manage the business side of the ranch, just as his father had predicted. Elizabeth, the baby, surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, opening a school in Oklahoma City, but spending her summers at the ranch where she had grown up. Rose and Samuel grew older together, their hair turning silver, their bodies moving a bit slower, but their love never diminishing. They sat on the porch together every evening, watching the sunset, just as they had been doing for decades. They held hands like young lovers, and Samuel still brought Rose wildflowers from the fields. Do you ever think about that day? Rose asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. The stagecoach? Every day, Samuel replied. I think about how easily I could have missed you. If I had been an hour later, if I had gone a different direction, you could have died or gone on to Oklahoma City and married someone else. I could have spent my whole life alone on this ranch, never knowing what I was missing. But you were there, Rose said softly. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, Samuel corrected. You gave my life meaning and purpose. You filled this house with love and laughter. You gave me children and grandchildren, a legacy that will continue long after we are gone. I was just a lonely cowboy before you came along. You made me whole. Rose leaned into his shoulder, comfortable, and content. "I never owned a single thing before you," she said, repeating the words she had spoken so many years ago. "And then you put a gold ring in my palm and smiled, and suddenly I had everything. You always had value, Rose. You just needed someone to see it. You saw it. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. That is the greatest gift you ever gave me." They sat in peaceful silence as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, the land they loved stretching out before them. In the distance, they could see Simon's house, smoke rising from his chimney. Grandchildren were probably gathered around his table for supper right now, just as Rose and Samuel's own children once had. The ranch was thriving, the family was healthy, and life was good. As the stars began to emerge and the air grew cold, Samuel helped Rose to her feet, and they went inside together. Their steps were slower now, but they still moved with the ease of two people who had walked side by side for so long they knew each other's rhythms without thinking. In their bedroom, Rose carefully removed the gold ring from her finger and placed it in the small wooden box on her dresser, where she kept her few precious things. The mother-of-pearl comb Samuel had given her on their first anniversary, a locket containing pictures of their children, a few dried wildflowers pressed flat as paper. She looked at the ring for a long moment, remembering. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, already in bed. "I am thinking about how one small thing can change everything," Rose said. "A ring, a proposal, a yes. That ring represented a promise, a future, a hope. It was the first thing I ever owned, and it led to everything else. This house, our family, a life beyond my wildest dreams." "Come to bed, my love," Samuel said gently. "We have many more years ahead of us to make more memories." Rose climbed into bed beside her husband, of over 40 years, and let him pull her close. His arms were still strong, his heart still steady beneath her ear. They had grown old together, and Rose could not imagine it any other way. "I love you, Samuel Vance," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too, Rose Vance," he replied. "Today, tomorrow, and always." They fell asleep as they had every night for 43 years, wrapped in each other's arms, the gold ring gleaming softly in the moonlight from its place in the wooden box, a symbol of promises kept and a love that had endured every test time could offer. The ranch continued to thrive under Simon's management, with James handling the financial aspects and all 4 children contributing in their own ways. Rose's dress shops employed over a dozen women, providing them with fair wages and dignified work. The Vance name was respected throughout Oklahoma, synonymous with integrity, hard work, and generosity. Rose and Samuel lived to see all their children married and settled, to hold and love 17 grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by family, the house and grounds overflowing with people who existed, because these two had found each other on a cold December day in 1882. When Samuel passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Rose held his hand and kissed his forehead one last time. She did not cry, though her heart was breaking. They had been blessed with 58 years of marriage, a lifetime of love and partnership. She had nothing to regret and everything to be grateful for. Rose lived 3 more years after Samuel's death, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, teaching the young ones to sew, telling stories about the early days of the ranch and the Wild West that was slowly disappearing into history and memory. She never stopped wearing her gold ring, turning it on her finger whenever she thought of Samuel, which was constantly. On a spring morning in 1943, Rose passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 80. She was buried beside Samuel on the hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and dates and one line, "Together, always." At her funeral, Simon stood before the gathering and spoke about his parents with tears streaming down his weathered face. He told the story of how they had met, of the gold ring and the proposal, of 2 people who had built something beautiful out of nothing. "My mother used to say she never owned a single thing before she met my father," Simon said. "But that was not quite true. She always had her strength, her skill, her determination. Those things were hers. What my father gave her was the chance to use those gifts, the support to build a life, and the love to make that life meaningful. Together, they created all of this." He gestured to the ranch spread out below them, to the family gathered to mourn and remember. "They created us, and that legacy will continue long after we are all gone." The The gold ring was passed down through the family, from Rose to Sarah's eldest daughter, each generation hearing the story of the poor orphan girl and the lonely cowboy who had saved each other. The ring became a family treasure, a symbol not just of Samuel and Rose's love, but of the truth that love can transform lives, that kindness matters, and that from the humblest beginnings, beautiful things can grow. The ranch itself remained in the family for generations, each new keeper of the land adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation Samuel and Rose had built. The house was expanded and modernized, but the original rooms remained, including Rose's sewing room, with its big windows, kept as a sort of shrine to the woman who had stitched together not just fabric, but a family. And on the hill where Samuel and Rose were buried, wildflowers grew thick every spring, gold and purple and red, as if the land itself remembered the love story that had begun with a rescue, a gold ring, and two people brave enough to believe in second chances and new beginnings. Their story became legend in the family, told and retold, embellished and cherished. But at its heart, it remained simple and true. A woman who had nothing, a man who had everything to give, and a love that proved that the most valuable things in life are not the ones you can hold in your hand, but the ones you hold in your heart. Rose had been right that snowy evening when Samuel placed the ring in her palm. She had never owned a single thing before, but from that moment forward, she owned the whole world because she owned love, and that was everything.